So today we are able to actually answer the question, who is the top manufacturer at the moment and why is that the case? Let's get into it. So much like the previous video about who is the top player, the top manufacturing stats is all coming from a fandom survey by Ultiworld, which actually had 3,000 plus respondents, so there is a good sample size in this data. And in much the same way that the previous survey was done, it was scored between 0 to 10, 10 being you absolutely love the brand, 0 being you absolutely hate it. So jumping right into the numbers, it was very surprising, I would say, because I think it has to be a pretty big shift from previous years. And that is because MVP, Axiom, and Streamline are the top dog by a decent margin with over half a point. This is definitely a change in trends, and it has to be in part due to the love for Simon and how much he reps the brand and how well it does. So MVP had a 7.29, and just below that was Innova and Discraft with a 6.77 and a 6.76, which is honestly so very surprising because I think Innova is kind of like the top dog, so the fact that they're not ranked number one is pretty crazy. And then in fourth we have Latitude with a 6.58. The fact that Kristen is repping that brand so well, and it has a decent amount of traction beforehand with all the graces and premium plastic that they produce, they are really on the up and up. And then below Latitude is Discmania with a 6.51, and then after that feels like a pretty big drop off with DGA 5.98, Dynamic 5.26, Prodigy 4.11, and Lone Star with a 3.58. So to me, this is clearly representing a huge love for players over plastic. I was thinking that Innova would be the top dog by a huge margin. I thought because everyone throws Innova, everyone pretty much likes Innova. They throw Halo at basically every tournament that I see. I thought that would be a number one, but I think it is a very different trend when you're looking at the diehard fans that are doing the survey that love new and interesting plastic, and that does seem to be MVP for the most part, with Innova and Discraft just not really meeting that mark, at least for the most recent period of time. And also with that point, Discmania being a little bit lower is also very intriguing, because if it was just a year or two ago, I think Discmania would be like number one or number two with all the love that they have for Eagle and Simon. But things are changing. We don't even know if Eagle's going to still be with Discmania. It is just so crazy at the moment. But I think the real losers here being Prodigy and Lone Star don't really feel that surprising. Like, I know very few people throw Lone Star, very few people even talk about Lone Star, and it does seem like they kind of has negative press by trying to sign every single person regardless of like skill level, and it does feel a little bit weird, and they signed the dog, which is also just so bizarre. But also with the idea of negative press, Prodigy has had so much negative feedback with the lawsuit and everything, and I think in my head, I think it had kind of like blown over. There was so much love for Isaac, still a lot of love for Ganon, that I thought people still liked Prodigy, but that very much does not seem to be the case. People like the player way more than the plastic. And looking more in depth at the scores, the true neutral player in the game is DGA, with nearly every vote being a 5. It is very intriguing that nobody really likes or dislikes DGA, they're just kind of there, whereas Latitude 64, MVP, and Discraft unanimously have very positive ratings, all nearly above 5+. And something a little bit intriguing is that the dynamic scores were very scattered. There was basically nobody that thought they were 0s, but also nobody thought they were 10s. They were really evenly distributed, and I wonder if this is because everyone knows about dynamic, but they don't really throw the plastic that much. And I think it's maybe because I'm from Kansas, but nearly everyone that I play with bags at least a couple of dynamic discs. So a little bit surprising to see there's not a ton of love for dynamic, especially with the Supreme plastic that I've really enjoyed. And then on to favoritism based upon political leaning. This is also a very interesting stat because it goes more into the depth about, is this person actually following a brand based upon political ideation, which is not something we often think about. The standouts for people that lean left are very much disliking Dynamic and Lone Star with a 0.44 and a 0.68 lower average score, whereas people that lean right favor Discraft, Dynamic, Prodigy, and Lone Star. And maybe this is because these brands seem to be popular in the South, whereas they're not as popular up north. Not entirely sure, but I definitely know that Lone Star in particular has a very favorable population in Texas, and Texas does normally lean right, but it also can go anyways. It's totally up in the air at times. And then looking at the stats of age and how that factors into who you prefer is also very intriguing, with the boomer generation favoring Prodigy and Lone Star. Again, I think this is probably because of political ideation, but very intriguing to see that, because in my head it just doesn't really matter. And the boomer generation favored much less MVP and Discmania, which was correlated with the left-leaning side, at least moderately. And then for the millennials, the average trend was a much lower score for basically everyone, but the primary low scores were Prodigy and Lone Star. And again, I think this might be because people are more informed about these companies. Maybe it's not even about politics. They just know know a lot more about what goes on with the Prodigy contracts, what went on with the Lone Star contracts, and how they were trying to get basically every single person. It's hard to say, but it was very intriguing. And then for Gen Z, there was a heavy decrease in love for Latitude and a heavy increase in love for Prodigy. And lastly, let's talk about the favorite. So this to me seems like it should be correlated with the highest rated companies, but that is actually very much not the case. I think people have favorites that kind of don't really go with the trend of like a score. They just really love some company because of the plastic. And I wonder if the discrepancy in these stats are because a manufacturer makes good plastic and people throw that plastic. Whereas if you were just rating a company from 0 to 10, you might rate it differently than calling it your favorite. I don't really know, but it is very interesting. But coming in at number 5 is Latitude 64 with 210 votes. Nearly 7% of responses were for Latitude. And I think this has to be because people just love their plastic. They love Kristen. It is just a good place overall. Number 4, Discmania with 8.5%. And again, I feel like people would vote Discmania way higher if Simon was on their team. So very hard to truly assess how that is actually possible if they were voted way lower. It's very hard to assess what the true value of Discmania is because it does seem to be very dependent on who is actually on the team. Coming in at number 3, Discraft with 14.6%. And I feel like Discraft is a company that I expect to get a lot more love. People throw them pretty consistently. People love Paul, and they definitely have a high number of influential players on the team. So I would have guessed they would have been like kind of fighting for number 1. Not the case, because number 2 took 18%, MVP, Axiom, and Streamline. And again, I think people definitely love the plastic before Simon, but because Simon has joined the team, created some great discs already, there is so much love for the entire company as a whole, and I think their trend for disc golf is just going to go up and up because it is just such good plastic and unique. But you know they're not the top dog. It has to be Innova, taking nearly 22%, way more molds than everyone else, and it's not even really close. It has to be Innova. There's so many people that just throw Innova. Everywhere I go, people are throwing Innova primarily, and I think it's because access is just so easy in comparison to everywhere else. So it is by no means a surprise that Innova takes the top spot for people's favorite. So there's also a lot of other very interesting things in this article that I will not go over, but be sure to check it out. It is definitely a worthy read, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. And let me know who you guys think is your favorite manufacturer and why, because I would love to know why people do favor certain brands over others. But with that, thank you so much for watching my content. This is the first day of Vlogmas, and I hope that I am worthy of becoming your daily watch every single day in the month of December. I'll be doing some amazing giveaways, so be sure to check out those, and be sure to check out my videos every single day, wild runs. Signing out, peace.